Great. So, we're starting a new series, Steps to Living a Dharma Life. So we want to look kind of practically, we want to look at the Dharma, but look also how it applies. How can we apply it in meditation and then also in our lives? Because that's really what the Dharma is about. It's about living a Dharma life. And we're going to change the format up a bit this time around. So you're probably all about to enter, kind of readying yourself for meditation, but we're not going to do that. What? And we're going to be drawing from this image, the Bhava chakra, the wheel of life, the Buddhist wheel of life, which goes, apparently, one source says it goes all the way back to the Buddha. So through the weeks we're going to build up, you may have come across it before, you may not have, don't worry, we're going to build up an understanding of what it's kind of, what it's getting at. But what I want to focus on this week, the title of this week is the centrality of mind. So when we look at that, it's a vision of existence, but it's one that's very different from the scientific model of the world of existence, as is fairly obvious. And Sangharakshita, our founder, once asked a Tibetan tulku, which do you think is true, the scientific or the Buddhist model of the universe? And he said, he paused and he said, well, both are useful, but they've got different uses. So what this model is, it's a model of consciousness. It's a model of consciousness. That's what it is. So I'm going to start by talking about the hub. Right in the centre here, we've got a cock, a snake and a pig. So those represent the volitional tendencies of greed, hatred and delusion. And they're at the hub because they're the sort of motive force that drives the whole wheel. So that's what I'm going to focus on this week. So volitions are mind. So it's sort of driven by mind. It's driven by mind, and in that sense, it is an image of consciousness, a model of consciousness. But what I wanted to do to start off with is throw it out to you and ask you a question, just to sort of turn to the 2 and 3 or 4 people you're sitting with, and just explore your sense of the reach of mind into your life. Yeah. So how far does your mind reach into your life as an influencing factor? Do you see what I mean? Yeah. How far does it reach? Or if you like it the other way round, is there anything in your life that mind as an influence doesn't reach? Yeah. Either which way. So just turn to your neighbours just for 5 minutes. Just a little question. Yeah, just a little question, to start with. See what you can come up with. Great, so let's come back into the big group, as it were. And let's just hear a bit about what you discovered. So what sort of places do mind reach into in life, and what places don't mind reach into? Or did you just have a good chat about it? Tempting, nice people,
We were talking about the kind of different types of experiences in our mind, like reactive mind.
Oh, yeah.
The kind of choice mind. So that was kind of where a bit of our conversation went.
Great. Yeah, mind's too small a word. In a way, there's more to the mind than just one mode. Yeah, great, thanks. Hi, Ezra.
I think our discussion centered around this dualism of agency and structure, in the sense that we talked about how with our mind we make choices, but also there is a structure that is already there.
In our minds? Or?
No, like outside.
A context.
Like where we are born.
Oh, yeah.
Or things that already exist.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You know, this Buddhist center exists so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I can decide to come here, you know, today.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, yeah, really interesting. Yeah, thanks. Very interesting. Any more touched on? Thanks, Timothy.
Just mainly about reactivity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Reoccurring trauma or reactivity to certain situations or people.
Yeah. So our mind sort of encountering the same situations as past experiences. Yeah. Interesting. Great, thanks, Luke. Maybe one more. Hi, Neil.
It's hard to think of any experience that doesn't involve our mind.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It is, isn't it? When you stop and think about it. And so therefore, we all believing that will be meditating every day without problem, won't we? Because we can see how central mind is to experience. So bing. So therein lies a kind of interesting fact that what I want to explore is how is it that mind is central to experience, and how is it that we kind of habitually marginalise mind as not very central to experience? Maybe you don't necessarily agree with that, but that's what I'm going to explore. Maybe, the questions can kind of come out in the process, but that's what I want to explore. And really, Buddhism says that mind is the medium for all experience. It's the medium for all experience. But there's quite a lot in that, I think. So let's see what we can draw out. What I want to do is follow what Buddhism suggests we do, which is look into experience. It doesn't want to kind of reach for a theory and then fit experience back into that theory. Instead, it invites us, it's always inviting us to look into experience. And it gives us a tool to do that, a very sharp tool to look more clearly than we usually do into experience. And that tool is the 5 skandhas, which translates as 5 heaps. I don't know if you can see my scroll on the board. So those heaps are Vijnana, Rupa, Vedana, Samya, and Samskara, which Vijnana translates as consciousness. Actually, interestingly, divided consciousness, but consciousness nonetheless. Rupa as form, it sort of roughly approximates matter, but actually significantly different from matter. Samya is interpretation or perception. Samskara is volitional tendencies, so the 3, the pig, the cock and the snake are volitional tendencies, they're samskaras. And then Vedana is this quality running through all experience of pleasantness or unpleasantness or neutrality. So it's a tool. They're not actually literally separate things, these. It's a tool or model for us to use to look into our experience, to see it more clearly. That's what the skandhas are. Experience of mine in relation to this, in this area, was actually 2 experiences. One was I went out to buy some shoes. I don't like shopping, so I try and do it as quickly as possible. This is totally absurd, but I'm even slightly resentful of having to shop. So I march into the shop. The same time, I'm prepared to buy things that are a bit more expensive because they'll last. So I go looking I need some walking shoes. And I'm really, really pleased because I'm out of the shop in about 10 minutes. With my shoes, so feeling kind of slightly sort of smug out the shop. And I get home, I put my shoes on and walk around in them, and I find that they pinch. So just on the right shoe, they're pinching. And so I kind of, I cross my fingers and hope that it's going to sort of adjust. So I keep walking around, but it's kind of painful. There's this pain constantly kind of reminding me. But I persevere. I've spent a lot of money on these shoes. I persevere. And then at a certain point, oddly, I can't remember what it was, I was wearing different socks or something like that, the pain relieves. And I go, oh, maybe I don't have to get a new pair of shoes, or I haven't made this stupid mistake. But then the pain comes back. But actually, this time it comes back, it is different. It's not as painful. It's not actually as painful. And I realised that pain that I'm experiencing in my foot is not just physical, it's mind. It's mind. Actually, kind of arising at the same time as that wince of pain from the shoe pinching is the thought, you stupid idiot. You went and spent all that money on a pair of shoes that pinch, that are not going to work, you're not going to be able to use. And that is part of the pain. But even after 26 years by then of meditation, I can't see that. That actually, that what seems like physical pain is in part mental. It's in part mind. So that's one experience. And so you've got different aspects to that. So form, the kind of foot and the form of the shoe are pinching, and that is unpleasant. The Vedana is unpleasant, but actually interpretation has got in there, is at play too, and the particular interpretation, you stupid idiot, why have you done that, has also an unpleasant Vedana. So it's piling kind of physical Vedana on actually our thoughts too, our interpretations are accompanied with Vedana. So mind present when I thought it was just physical. Yeah. So that's one example. But perhaps more serious, another example for me was COVID. So when we were plunged into lockdown and really didn't know what we were dealing with, it was pretty scary, wasn't it? Were we going to live or not? And amidst all that horror, the shock of it, the difficulty of it, I was really moved by what surfaced into the news, just like lots of stories of people helping other people out, lots of kind of community spirit, people going out their way day after day to make sure other people had basic requirements, all that sort of stuff. And I was really moved by that. And then it sort of shifted my sense of the world, actually. And then we came out of lockdown, and the second lockdown we went into, there wasn't the same quantity of those sorts of stories sort of surfacing into the news. And just the sort of, that difference kind of left me realizing, sort of peeling apart this sort of cynical sense of the world that basically people are out for themselves, from this community spirited, a lot of community spirited kind of generous world that surfaced into the news in the first lockdown. And it took me a while to kind of reflecting on this to realize that is my mind. That is my mind. That cynical, it's embarrassing to say, but that cynical version of the world, that I thought was the world, because that's what we get in the news. The news tells us that it's like that very easily, is actually my mind. It's actually my mind. It's my own cynical interpretation of the world. Prior to that, I could not see that was an interpretation. So this is actually what we do, what we tend to do. We take a story, an interpretation, and then we take it literally as the world. And we can't actually separate, we can't actually distinguish. We don't distinguish between the two. We take it literally. So that's one of the key ways in which we marginalize the influence of mind in our lives. We're doing it kind of all the time, literalizing what's merely an interpretation. And of course, there's probably some coincidence between that interpretation and the evidence, the world, in my case, or particular people. It's just that they're not entirely the same, and they may be significantly different as they were in that first lockdown. But by kind of by literalizing our interpretation, in some ways, we perpetuate a particular world. I'm not particularly going to talk about that very much because that will come out in later weeks. But what I want to do is more just show how this model, I'm not going to talk very much about these two, but this element of interpretation gets mixed up, conflated with this. And actually, so it's mainly these three that I'm going to talk about. So I don't know if you can relate to that in your own experience, but this is what I want to do, kind of look into our experience, and see how actually our mind is much more of an influence in kind of shaping our experience of ourselves and the world. Yeah, so principally, this aspect of taking an interpretation literally, our tendency to literalize an interpretation. But I want to talk now a bit more about what Buddhism does mean actually by vijnana, mind or consciousness, and rupa, form. Because it's a bit different from our modern notion of mind, or consciousness, and our modern notion of matter. But principally what I want to do is sort of help us see that actually through samya, through interpretation, we draw these lines, we make these distinctions, and then we take them literally. And actually we can own that act and see that we're doing that, if you see what I mean, which opens us up to being able to reevaluate, re-explore experience. Do you see what I mean? Yeah, that's the main thing I want to do in this session, the first half. So, yeah, what is meant by mind and what is meant by form? Well, perhaps focusing a bit more on form to start off with. So, first of all, matter isn't really a very good translation of rupa. Because in Buddhism there isn't actually an absolute distinction between mind and matter. That distinction that we have in the West, there isn't a corresponding kind of absolute distinction between those two things. So what therefore is meant by rupa, by form, and it's not form merely in the sense of an idea, a sort of image or something. So if you take a flower, so draw in from Centrality, if you think of a flower, well, the recognition, flower, is something that's happening in our minds. So too the perception of colour and the sense of beauty and shape and smell, those are all things arising in our minds. And there is the flower in itself. There's the flower in itself. And that's what is being pointed to by this term rupa, this term form. So there is an element in experience that's outside of our control. And that's this element of rupa, some sort of corresponding to your point about structures, things that are already there. Yeah, so it's outside of our control. It's also true that we can't know it objectively. We can't actually know it objectively. We can't know what the flower is in and of itself. All we can do is be aware of what our perception of it is. So we can only know it subjectively, if you see what I mean. So that is what rupa is kind of pointing to. So what that means is that whatever's out there, we cannot absolutely know it. It remains always a mystery, fundamentally a mystery. So rupa is that objective component outside of our control that is a mystery. That's what's being meant. So that's quite different from the term matter, isn't it? So that sort of runs against our conditioning, really, doesn't it? Our sort of scientific conditioning. We have got a sense that we do know what's out there. We've got quite a lot of detailed research that is evidenced, concluding sort of what is out there. And I found this way of thinking about the mistake science, or if you like, kind of popular science makes. Popular science meaning myself. And that is that science has science knows how things function. Science knows how things function, and then makes the mistake of assuming that we therefore know what's there. Do you see what I mean? That's what science. That's the danger, the leap, which is not sound logic. That science popularly used, like by me, probably cutting-edge scientists would never make that assumption. Yeah, but that's kind of what's where we sort of differ from the sort of popular scientific, where Buddhism differs from the sort of popular scientific kind of perspective. So I want to come back to that, but I hope it's at least explained a bit more by what we mean by rupa, and the key point being that it remains a mystery, so any interpretation we have of it is only an interpretation or a perception. Yeah. I want to stop there because the main thing I'm exploring is how is it that mind is the medium for all experience. So even that objective component is only known to us through mind. It's only, that's our only experience of it. So even that is an experience in mind. So, as I say, we tend to, in the West, sort of believe that there is a really existing, fixed, knowable world of things out there. That's the assumption that I've grown up with, anyway. It's just that assumption also reduces mind. It reduces mind back to just something created by the brain. And Buddhism doesn't go along with that, actually. It's a bit like mind is merely sort of equipment, if you like, sort of even faulty equipment. It's not entirely capable of perceiving what's there. Sort of mind as kind of faulty equipment that's sort of stuck in the body. I realise that realise myself that mind, I tend to actually just have an image of a circle. Mind is a kind of circle around me. That's actually the sort of image, when I use that word, that I'm drawing from, that mind is a kind of circle that roughly approximates my physicality, but not entirely. And that's not how Buddhism sees mind, actually. Buddhism gives us a radically different, though subtly different, notion of what mind or consciousness is. So Buddhism again comes back to experience with this. Buddhism points out that consciousness only arises with these kind of two poles of experience, of perceiver and perceived. So the notion that mind is a function just of this bit and not that bit actually isn't borne out by experience, or at least there's no evidence in experience that mind consciousness can arise without the other pole. Do you see what I mean? So actually the notion of consciousness that Buddhism gives us is that consciousness is somehow this experience, not only of this, but also of that. Consciousness kind of arises in dependence upon these two. So it's the medium in that sense too, in some sort of subtle but profoundly different sort of sense. We tend to, as I say, just think of it as pertaining to this bit, a bit like it's kind of part of the mechanics of perception, sort of equipment, if you like, or at least arises from the equipment. And we could take ourselves out of an experience of a world and still be conscious. But there's no experience that you can find, that you can ever have, that is that. Do you see what I mean? So it's a notion, could be true, who knows, but it's a notion that's not borne out at all by experience. And Buddhism kind of refutes it. So I was really struck by some of the quotes that Vardika brought out last week, and so I'm just going to copy him because I thought they're so good. So he mentioned Alva Noah, professor in philosophy at University of California, specializing in theory of perception and consciousness. So not a Buddhist, I believe, but in his book Out of Our Heads, he directly challenges the view that the brain is a source of consciousness or mind. He says, you are not your brain. You have a brain, yes, but you are a living being that is connected to an environment. You are embodied and dynamically interacting with the world. We can't explain consciousness in terms of the brain alone because consciousness doesn't happen in the brain alone. So there we are. He goes on. To reflect on experience is not to look inward. It is to pay attention to what you are doing and to the way in which what you are doing is world and situation and environment involving. Suppose I am a hiker. I walk along and move my legs in all sorts of subtle ways to follow a path along a trail. But the steps I take and the way I move my legs are modulated by, controlled by, the textures and bumps and patterns of the trail itself. There is a kind of locking in. To study experience, to think about the nature of experience, is to look at this two-way dynamic exchange between world and the active perceiver. Isn't that really, really interesting? So yeah, it sort of breaks down certainly my assumed notion of mind. And it brings us closer to a sort of deeper sense of mind as the medium of experience, somehow inseparable from the experience of world out there. Yeah. So let's check how we're doing for time. We're running over time. So yeah, what I want to do is just invite us to notice that this is what we're doing all the time, that we're drawing lines. We've got a notion of what mind is. We sort of have to interpret to sort of make sense of the chaos of our sense impressions. It's just we tend to literalize our interpretations. Yeah. And what Buddhism is inviting us to do is to look closer at experience. If we go deeper into experience, we're not so, our security, our sense of stability isn't so bound up with our interpretations. Do you see what I mean? Because you go into experience and you are actually experiencing something. It's not like your mind and your world is going to disappear because you're actually kind of based in your experience. So yeah, that's what I want us to do. I hope that sort of opened up, questions, sort of what your assumed experience of life is, so that we can kind of look a bit more closely into experience. I will say that this does really run against the way I've been brought up, the way I assume most of us have been brought up. And it can be hard to unpick some of this stuff. It can be hard even to see, actually, that it's an interpretation. I remember looking at trees and thinking, it's a tree, it's a tree, it's a tree. For me, a little breakthrough, actually, was watching a series called A Volatile History, I think that's what it's called, Volatile History, a BBC series on chemistry. Don't know how I found myself watching it, but there we are. And it gave us the sort of history of chemistry, going back into the sort of alchemical view of the world and what it constitutes, and just mad ideas. So they were trying to transform urine into gold, and it's like, that is completely bonkers, and then we come up to date, and we've got this version of the world conceived of through the elemental table, that there are these kind of fixed solid constituents that all physical, all matter is reducible to. And I just sort of started to feel more relaxed, that I can kind of go with, and then that actually is history. That's history. We come to modern science, and I start feeling quite uncomfortable again. That actually there aren't sort of fixed constituents. Even the elements themselves, they discover that you can make new elements. They're not sort of fixed and solid and stable. The world is not fixed and solid and stable. And I realised, oh my goodness, this is just my conditioning, that I've been heavily conditioned. It's not even as dignified as a view. I've not sort of come to it as an individual view, that this is what the world is like. It's not even as personal as a belief, a personal conviction. I don't actually have it as a personal conviction. What it is my conditioning. It's simply my conditioning. Similar to being in England, I feel more relaxed. I know what's happening when I'm in England as opposed to in India. With this view, this modern scientific view, I feel more relaxed. I sort of know what's happening. But all it is just conditioning. And that, for me, was a bit of a breakthrough, seeing that what I literalize as a world is actually just kind of conditioning. So anyway, I hope that's left you with food for thought, at least food for further exploration, because what I want to do now is go into meditation, because that's all true of our kind of the not just the macrocosm but the microcosm of our meditation. That actually we've literalized an interpretation of this experience too. Even when we've got our eyes closed, we've done that. So let's explore that a little bit. Let's explore our actual physical experience of the breath. That's really what we're doing in the mindfulness of breathing. And particularly, we'll do that by seeing if we can get closer and closer to our actual experience and see where we're bringing an interpretation, an idea, or a sort of subtle image to our experience, extra to the physical sensations of the breath and the body. Yeah, do you see what I mean? So that's what we'll do to try and explore this area a bit more. We'll get a bit of chance after the tea break to discuss this further, but for now, let's go into that. So if you'd like to set up for meditation. Yeah, we can record it, yeah. Thanks, Maria. So when you're ready, just closing your eyes. And just allowing your attention to settle into your experience. The experience of light falling through your eyelids, of sound, perhaps some smell and taste. And the sensations of the body, the element of touch. And see if you can just let your physical experience reveal itself to your awareness in more and more detail. Just by sitting here, you might notice stray thoughts. Just let those be there. Don't try and stop them. So just gently attending to the physical experience of the body. So see if you can feel what's happening in your belly. With the rise and fall of the breath. And then your face, just seeing if you can soften the face. Just notice if there are any expressions left over, this softening. So the face is neutral. But as you do that, really feeling the sensations, a sense of temperature, and see if you can let the whole scalp relax and spread over the skull. Attentive to what that feels like. And then feeling the ground or the chair or cushion underneath us, pushing up. See if you can let your weight just drop down through into the ground. And now starting to rest your attention in the sensations in the hands. See if you can just stay with those sensations with a sort of open, explorative kind of attitude. Getting closer to your actual experience. Perhaps there's a sense of temperature. The contact of skin on skin. And see if you can notice that as well as those sensations, there are elements of image of the hands, outline if you like. Which is actually just something you're imputing. If you look closer into the experience, can you find in sensation any clear line, outline? And then looking into your experience of the breath. Seeing if you can get closer to the actual sensations by just sort of letting go of any interpreted outline. See if that helps you get more intimate with your actual experience of the breath. And if you feel yourself sort of pushing away, outline, just relax that. Just get more curious about the sensation. Just letting the experience of form be a mystery. And as we come towards the end of this short practice, just dropping any effort that you're making. Just let whatever's happening happen. So we'll take a tea break now. Great, so welcome back. We're going to break into groups now actually. Just to explore, give you a chance to sort of explore further this area. And so a couple of questions for you, which you might want to explore in the groups. Kind of looking at your life and what you do and the attitudes or stories within your life, which of those activities, stories, attitudes support this sense that mind is the medium for all experience, and which undermine or minimize, marginalize the extent to which mind is the medium and therefore the influence, a crucial influence in your in your life. Yeah, so just looking at your life, you might want to look at your leisure time. What are the attitudes and activities that support or kind of undermine that sense? Your work, what about at work? What are the attitudes and stories and things you do there? And at home. Yeah. So, yeah, let's get into groups. We can probably break up into 4 groups. So, Dharma-siddhi, Sadharaja, myself, and Yashodhaka will all lead groups. And we'll just go, it's relatively short, we'll just go up to 9 o'clock dead, and then we'll come back. And I want to say a little bit more, take us a little bit further, and then finish with a meditation. So if we come back ready to start again at 9, then we'll be able to get a decent meditation in. Yeah, great. Okay, so I'll do a group through this away, and then there could be 2 groups in 3. Great. So just to take this little bit of the Wheel of Life a bit further, because the mind is central in another way in Buddhism too. It's central in the sense that that's where Buddhism starts. It's kind of the starting point, is the mind. And so I just want to explore that a little bit through exploring these 3 images of the cock, the snake, and the pig. So the cock represents greed, because hens are always, if they can, eating. In the West, we generally think of pigs as greedy, don't we? But it's not what it means here. And then the snake is hatred, and the pig, delusion, or ignorance. This is because when he eats, his ears flop over his eyes. So it's an image in the Indian imagination of ignorance. And I was reading Subhuti's very, very good book called The Buddhist Vision, and he draws out of this that actually it's unfair to pigs, unfair to hens, and unfair to snakes, because these emotions that they represent are never experienced by pigs, hens, and snakes. They are distinctively human failings. That's what he draws out, which is a really interesting point, isn't it? So in a certain way, what's at the central is a self-conscious awareness. So this is image of the whole of kind of conscious existence, but communicated to humans, human beings, because it's talking about self-consciousness. Yeah, these represent the kind of primitive urges that underlie all human bondage and misery. The whole wheel, there are the 6 realms, which is the largest segment of the wheel. Dharma-siddhi is going to explore those a bit more. But even, in a way, the realm of the gods is a realm of bondage, actually, in Buddhism. So that's interesting, isn't it? Anyway, I won't say more about that. So yeah, the human being is self-aware. So we are capable of things that animals are not capable of. We're capable of calculated war, for example. Animals are not actually capable of that. We're capable of kind of taking a dislike to particular social groupings. Animals don't do that. They're just functioning on instinct. We're capable of enormous degrees of greed and capable of ignorance in ways that animals aren't sort of culpable for. So that's kind of what's being got at here. And just to add in, the metaphor is that we're trapped on a wheel, human bondage. We're trapped on a wheel, and the aim is to get off it. The aim is to get off it. So that little detail is important, isn't it? Yeah, so just to say a bit more about self-consciousness before we meditate, because that is our distinctive human capacity, but it also brings awful things with it, the capacity for awful things with it. So, this self-awareness kind of arises, ego identity arises out of our evolutionary kind of history. It arises, but it's quite fragile. It's actually quite fragile when it arises. It's sort of very caught up with the body. Our identity is sort of very caught up with the body and our possessions and our relationships. And therefore, it's intimately bound up, entwined with things that are inherently transient, unreliable. And therefore, our sense of self is insecure. It's also based on our kind of drives, which fluctuate and change, don't they, every day? So this kind of sense of a stable identity is actually very insecure. And because of that insecurity, our ego identity couples with our instincts for survival, and those instincts for survival are this instinct you see throughout conscious life of aversion, pushing away what threatens us, and trying to amass what affirms, benefits us. And then this third one that I'll say a bit more about shortly. So that's an attempt. We do that in an attempt for security. It's just that the way evolution works is it's not designed. It just kind of draws on what's available. So it's drawing on those evolutionary, those survival instincts to sort of maintain or try and secure our identity. So that manifests in greed, hatred, and delusion. That's what we mean and know by greed, hatred, and delusion. So greed, not just being our natural desires, like our need for food and wanting to satiate that, but craving, or perhaps it's simpler to put it, term it sort of neurotic desire, whereby we're actually seeking from things to shore up our identity. We feel we always need more than our neighbours to kind of feel secure enough. For example, we feel we need those people in our lives, so we kind of cling to them and go, sort of try and ensure that they will stay in our lives in all sorts of ways that only sometimes push them away. In that way, it's sort of neurotic. Even food can get kind of neurotic, can't it? So it's this sort of looking for security. Even ideas, actually, it can be ideas that we cling to certain ideas, even religious ideas, out of a sense of insecurity, rather than kind of using them to grow. Yeah. So it's that tendency that we're talking about that drives this whole wheel of limitation or bondage or misery. And then the snake, aversion, is this kind of tendency whenever we're threatened, whenever identity is threatened, to want to destroy, push away, attack, which we might experience as a defense, but actually the other person experiences that as an attack. Yeah, so it's that kind of tendency, and as we know, the proportions of that can be hideous. That's where war comes from. This sort of calculated, even though it arises from threat, it can become a conscious intention that we kind of get behind, taking hideous proportions. And then the pig, ignorance. So that is when we, to preserve our own sense of security, we ignore things. We stick our head in the sand. We see things about ourselves that we next week have forgotten. It's amazing. Have you caught yourself doing that? It's fascinating. We just sort of almost don't seem able to sort of keep it in awareness. We've subtly pushed it aside without even kind of quite realizing we've done it. That's what this is about. So the path, Buddhism starts with taking responsibility for our evolutionary inheritance, seeing that we have these volitional tendencies, samskaras, that they are part of our makeup, and taking responsibility for them. And there's a few things to say about that. We can't control them. We can't control it. It'd be great if we could just control them, but control is not going to work. Instead, we can take responsibility. So it may be that you've acted despite yourself in a certain way. Well, you can take responsibility for that. You can own it. That is what happened. You can say it to your friends who are trying to grow. That is what I did. That enables us to take responsibility for something, for impulses that we can't control. It doesn't mean that that they are our fault. So we did not design this mind. We have inherited it. It's not necessarily our fault. Some of our early conditioning, which may be problematic, is not our fault. It is, however, our responsibility. If we sideline that responsibility and say, because it's not my fault, I can act in any way I like, well, that is what we'll do. Yeah, so it's only us that can take responsibility for this particular mind. And if we can do that, then we can actually start to choose love, awareness, generosity, the opposite of those three things. So that's what becomes possible if and only if we take responsibility. These are deep-seated habitual tendencies. We are not going to somehow suddenly be loving, generous and aware all the time unless we take responsibility for our evolutionary inheritance, basically. So that is why mind is also central in Buddhism. It's the sine qua non, that without doing that, there is no path of Buddhism. Of course, that in itself is a path. You know, we don't suddenly take responsibility one day and job done. Actually, it's through kind of seeing these tendencies that we slowly sort of take responsibility. But if we do that, we gather our volition into our willing. And that's how we can start to choose to act, even when we're threatened, still act with love. That's what becomes possible, and that's where the spiritual life sort of starts. So this is the great work, and this is the basis of the Mettabhavana, this sort of taking responsibility for our minds. And it's really, really important that we do it without a sense of recrimination, without a sense of recrimination. We need instead to do it with kindness. It's not easy to have a mind that has that at the centre of it. So let's be kind to ourselves and patient with ourselves. So that's what I thought we could focus on in the meditation. We'll do the Mettabhavana, and in the stages, we'll particularly focus, the fourth stage is the obvious kind of challenge here, but can we, it's difficult, it's uncomfortable for us to be with this person. Can we just stay with that experience with sort of non-judgmental, kindly attention and get closer and closer to the actual experience of it, not pop up into thoughts which only give fuller expression. They're actions of hatred, are thoughts. In Buddhism, actions of body, speech and mind. Yep. So can we instead stay closer to the experience with this kindly, non-judgmental? Probably something, if we can get close to it, there'll be something that's threatening. We find something threatening about this person. Let's just see if we can kindly, patiently be with ourselves, feel that threat, and therefore not be determined by it. Yeah.